We're going to start in with our algebra stuff with something called combining like terms or combining terms. Uh, there's a lot of different little pieces that we're going to talk about before we start solving equations. And this is going to be the first one that we're going to need to hit, the first one we're going to need to cover. In a lot of the equations you're going to see, you will notice that there's different variables. And when I say variables, I mean like the letters in them. So for instance, in these situations, x is a variable, y is a variable. When we combine terms, basically what we're doing is we are adding or subtracting. Okay, this is all going to be adding and subtracting. Eventually we'll do multiplication and division, but right now combining terms is just adding and subtracting. This is just a brief overview of how it works, and then we'll get into a lot of specific examples. For example, x plus x is 2x. Okay, 5x plus 2x is 7x. Pretty self-explanatory, I think. And down here is the difference. 10x plus 4y is still 10x plus 4y. You'll notice the only things that we can actually put together are the items that have the exact same variable at the end of it. So for instance, these both have x's, so we can put those together. These both have x's, so we can put those together. This has an x, this has a y. Those do not go together. Alright, this is the first big problem we're going to look at here with combining terms. And there's a lot of little things that you can do to set yourself up for success. One of the things I like to do is I just call adding a 1. And what I mean by that is if you see one of these variables that doesn't have anything in front of it, so for instance, y, that just means you have one y. So if it's less confusing for you to do this, just put a 1 in front of it if there's no number in front of it. That just means there's one of them. The other thing that really helps I call boxing off. How you would do that is you take each one of these variable number combinations separately and you put a box around it and you include the symbol that's in front of it. And what I mean by that is, here is negative 2x. So I've got my 2x and I've got a negative sign or a minus sign in front of it. I am going to put a box around that. This, when we get done with it, is just going to help us, so all we really have to do is add things together, which I think is pretty helpful. I'm going to find something else that's an x in here, and if I look through here, there's nothing else that's an x. So I'm going to move to my y's. And what I like to do when I box off these things is I like to put a different shape around the different variables that will go together. So for instance, I put an actual rectangle around the x's. Maybe for the y's, I'll put a circle around them just to know that those two things will never be able to go together. So for instance, 5y, and we're going to include the symbol in front of it. 6y, and we're going to include the symbol in front of it. Minus 1y, we're going to make sure we keep that symbol in front of it with it. We've got all those. Now, the last thing we have is we've got a number that does not have a variable at the end of it. This cannot be put with any of the other things. It's basically like having nothing behind it is its own specific category. So maybe for this one, I'm going to include the symbol in front of it. I'll put a triangle. Okay. So now this should be pretty easy to combine these together. Now all I really have to do, if you box them off, is kind of think addition. Addition of like positives and negatives. So I'll start with the x's. I've got nothing to put with that. So that is the only thing I have for the x's. So down here I'll just write minus 2x. Okay. I'll put a plus after it because we're adding these together even though some of them we won't be able to put together. The y's. 5y and 6y. If I put those together, that's going to be 11y. And then I have another y that I have to put on with it. I have a negative 1y. So 11y plus negative 1y is positive 10. So that would be 10y. Okay. So I mean, you can think about that in a lot of different ways. You can think about it as 11y plus negative 1y. It could just be 11y minus 1y, but either way it's going to be 10y. And then all we have left is this minus 4. There's nothing we can put the minus 4 with, so I'm just going to put minus 4 at the end. So this is my final answer for combining these together. I've put everything together that will go together. The y's will go together, the x's will go together, there was only one of them, and the regular numbers will go together, and there was only one of those. Alright, here's our second problem. We've got 5x plus 2x minus 10x minus 4x minus 2x. We don't have any ones that we're going to need to put in there because they all have numbers in front of them. So let's go ahead and box them off. Now the nice thing about this one is they're all x. They all have a variable of x, so we know we're going to put them all together. So for instance, we've got 5x, and I'm going to box it off and keep the symbol in front of it. Now there's obviously no symbol in front of the first one. The last one had a negative in front of it, but if there's no symbol in front of it, obviously it's going to be a positive number. So it looks like we'll do this, that, keeping that symbol in front of it, and this. Now it can just be a basic addition problem, and there's a lot of ways that you can do that. You can do them individually one at a time, you can combine some certain things, but all of these can go together. So I'm going to notice right away on this one, I think it'd be nice, is I have a positive 2x and a negative 2x, which is going to make a 0. So maybe for this one, I just cross these off and don't even use them because I know that that's going to make 0. Now I just have the rest of them. I've got 5x, I've got negative 10x, and I've got negative 4x. So maybe I put these two together. That could be negative 14x. And then I just have 5x plus negative 14x. 5x plus negative 14x, or just 5x minus 14x, that should be negative 9x, and that would be your answer. Now, just another way to do this, I could just go straight down the line if I wanted to. If I wanted to include this in here, I could. And I could just go straight down the line if that makes more sense to you. So for instance, 5 plus 2 is 7x. If I do 7x minus 10x, or 7x plus negative 10x, that's going to be negative 3x. Keep on going down the line here. Negative 3 and negative 4 is negative 7. And then my last one on down the line here, negative 7x, negative 2x, is negative 9x. Either way, it will work out just fine. Now, if you think you're getting the hang of it at this point, you could just try it on your own and see how you do. But I'll definitely go through it here with you to see if we can figure it out. We'll do a couple more of these, then I'll have you do some on your own for sure. So how I would start this one is put a 1 in front of anything that doesn't have a number, and looks like we're okay there. Now I'm going to box things off. I've got a lot of different things here that are going to go together. I've got regular numbers, I've got y's, and I've got x's. Okay? So the regular numbers, I'll just put a circle around. Okay? There's positive 3, or no, I guess that's an oval. And here I want the symbol in front of it, so that's going to be negative 2. Now if I do the y's, maybe I'll put a square or rectangle around those. So I keep the symbol in front of this one. That's going to be a minus 2y, or a negative 2y. And then I've got another y here, so I'm going to keep the symbol in front of it. Just like that. Now the last thing I have is the x's. Keep the symbol in front of it. Now this has two symbols, but just keep in mind that plus and negative is the same thing as minusing. So I'm just going to keep the minus in front of it. I'll put a triangle around that. And then over here I've got a minus 4x. Keep the symbol in front of it. Put a triangle there. Now I should be able to keep track of things, keep them separate, and get my answer here. Okay. So let's see here. Let's start with, I don't know, the x's. Okay. We could just go in alphabetical order, would be good. So the x's, I've got negative 5 and I've got negative 4. That should be negative 9x. And if you like putting a plus in between everything, that's fine. I'll rewrite it another way just so you see what's going on here. Negative 2y, positive 3y. If I put a negative 2 and a positive 3, that should be a positive 1. So I could write this as just y if I wanted to, is fine, because understand that y is the same thing as 1y. So we could just do that as okay. And then I just have my regular numbers left. Looks like I have 3 and negative 2 would be positive 1. So positive 1 plus 1. Okay. Now if that was negative 1, I'd put minus 1. So here's my answer right here. I have negative 9x plus y plus 1. If you wanted to write it like this, I could write it negative 9x plus 1y plus 1. That would be fine. If you switched up the order of these things, which would be okay, I could write it y plus 1 minus 9x. That would be okay. Just as long as when you take your answer, if you could box them off and they'd be the same thing, then you're all right. So like, for example, if I did this and boxed everything off, and then if I rewrote it this way in a different order, it's exactly the same. I still have my negative 9x. I still have my positive y. Even though this doesn't have a plus in front of it, it's positive. And then I have my plus 1 right there. Alright, last practice one, then we'll do some for real here. Let's put the 1 in front of that y down there because we don't have a number in front of us. So that becomes minus 1y. Okay? Now, you don't have to do that if you have the concept that y is the same thing as 1y. Okay? Now, boxing off. Now, the one thing I want to caution you on here is if you have this, the two negatives, just change it to a plus right away so you don't have to deal with it. Okay? Because we know that the two minuses make a plus in our add subtract. So now I can box them off. So all I have is x's except for that y. So I can just put my box around that, keep the symbol in front of it, and then down at the end I don't even need to box that off because I know that that's separate from everything else. Alright, now we can just add all these together and we'll be in good shape here. Negative 2x, negative 57x would make a negative 59x. Okay, and if you have trouble thinking about that, just write the problem down. Everybody should be able to do negative 2 plus negative 57. That shouldn't be a problem, and that's just what we're doing. Negative 59 plus 3x, okay, and it's plus 3, so we got to go back towards 0, so that looks like that would be negative 56x. And then if we put in this negative 5x, we're going to go backwards again, away from 0. So that would be negative 61x. And all I have left is this negative 1y. Put it on the end. Nothing goes with it. These two things can't be put together. That's my final answer.